Do is we'll read from the Shivchei Baal Shem Tov about the passing of the Baal Shem Tov, and then if we have some time, maybe we'll do one more Baal Shem Tov teaching on specifically on things like having to do with Havana or Machshav Zara and such. Okay, so so this part. So just we don't have to. Now's not the time to go into all the details of what the Shivchei Baal Shem Tov is and all that. Basically, it's the first book of stories and even biography of the Baal Shem Tov. It was published in the early 18 teens, like 1813 or something, but it's based on manuscripts that were circulating for decades, already starting within the decade or two after the Baal Shem Tov's passing, 1760s. So even already possibly from the 1770s and up. Then it seems like the main collector of these stories, which are these vignettes, like anecdotal stories, is someone by the name of Ber of Linitz, I think, who was the son-in-law of one of the Baal Shem Tov scribes, and who was hanging out with the students of the Baal Shem Tov who were still alive after Baal Shem Tov and others. So these are quite and these are, you could say, these are quite like first or second-hand accounts, or from the people who have experienced, gone through these stories, and it's a fascinating collection. Everyone, especially academics, go over it like with tooth, what do you say, tooth combs or something. Okay. Tooth nails and combs, right? Toothbrushes and comb, yeah. So and now, when it was published, it was actually published by a Chabad Chassid who had the printing press in Kapust, I think it was printed. And there he inserted the first quarter or third of it is actually the early stories of the Baal Shem Tov, how he came into the world, his old father, how he was born and grew up, and how he became a teacher, a Malamed, and all these really far out stories there, until more or less the time when he began revealing himself. There's that early chunk, and then it goes through all the different stories of Baal Shem Tov. And now that early part from pre-birth of Baal Shem Tov till he was ready to reveal himself, the publisher says this is what he received or even possibly heard, I don't know what form, or received from the Alter Rebbe of Chabad, which is interesting because we don't really associate the Alter Rebbe with being all into storytelling. But that's the way it's published, and then the rest is the stuff from Dever Linitz. Okay, so now at the end of this whole collection, the last couple of stories, not mamash in the end, there's about the passing. Okay, just giving you the context here. So here we are. So he goes. Echtev ksas. I'm going to write a bit mitirasa about the passing of the Baal Shem Tov. He passed away the first day of Shavuot. The earlier part, he speaks about a couple stories before about the passing of his wife, and that why he didn't want to remarry or something like that. Okay, but now we were dealing about Shem Tov. So he says here you already see Shivchei Baal Shem Tov, which is translated as in praises of Baal Shem Tov. He's already passed away the first day of Shavuot. I see your hand up. iPhone, anything brief, or is that from before?
Sorry, from before. I'm putting it.
Okay, all right. So now, we're giving the backstory. What led up to the passing of the Baal Shem Tov? That the Pesach Shekaidim Zeh, that means 7 weeks before Pesach. The famous Pinchas Karetz, one of the main disciples of Baal Shem Tov and great also writer, receiver of the Baal Shem Tov. So he was visiting the Baal Shem Tov. And he was a little weak about Pinchas Karetz. And therefore, because he wasn't feeling well, he wasn't the last day of Pesach. He wasn't sure if he should go to the mikveh or not. So Pinchas Karetz, he said, "Okay, you're not feeling well. Let's go to the mikveh." That was that means actually this means erev shishal Pesach. That's what it means. Okay, so he didn't go to the mikveh for the last days of Yom Kippur for shishal Pesach. So now it came Shmishal Pesach with tefillah, The Pinchas Parts is davening, and Ra, he had a vision. So he had a vision that there was a decree from above that the Baal Shem Tov will soon pass away, because the Baal Shem Tov was fighting struggle, fighting against the cult of Shapei Tzvi, the Sabbatian. Like we spoke before, I'm not sure which story, but it is mentioned before. The story when they wanted to burn the Babylonian, the Gemara. It's a famous story. Actually, when he says here Kashat Tzvi, it actually means the Frankist. The earlier Frankism, you'll see here, and Yaakov Empton and others describe it, still see it as a continuation of Shabtai Tzvi. As we know, Yaakov Frank was initially influenced, and he started off his cult of Frankism as an extension of Sabbatianism, actually the most radical faction of Sabbatians, Shabsai. And it was only later, especially when he came back to Europe, and later when he was challenged to convert to Christianity, that you could say when he
to
Christianity. That's the difference.
Frank had that. Okay.
Right.
Frank.
So when he converted to Christianity, that is when it seems like you could define it as different than Sabbatianism. So it has its origins in Shabtai Tzvi, but it became its own creature or monster, even if you want to call it. And part of that was the famous disputation, I think it was in Lvov, right? In Lviv, as they call it now, of the Talmud. And that is when the Frankists sided with the churches to debate. They were called the anti-Talmudists, they were calling themselves then. And I forget which year, it was 1758 or 9, maybe it was 1759, something like that. Right before the passing of Baal Shem Tov, like a year or so before. The Pavel Manietsky and what's his name, Jay Michelson, have written books on Frankism in the last few years in great gory detail. And if anyone wants,
I was about to ask you.
You could look it up.
What was the name of the books again?
One is Mixed Multitudes. That's Pavel Manietsky's book. He's actually the more of the scholar and historian, and he knows Polish, and he's gone through all the materials. Jay Michelson's book, I don't recall the title. It was a finalist for the National Jewish Book Award. It may have won the National Jewish Book Award. I don't remember. But I would say they're both worthy of reading. I personally have not read either in detail. So again, what I have read about this period and other things is more from original sources, or from the way it's brought down also even in Hasidic sources. The previous Rebbe in Likutei Deburim has his version of it. And in that was that the Baal Shem Tov sent his student of Chaim Rappaport, author of the Heshiv Kayin, Responsa, who was involved to defend the Talmud. And the great story and miracle from the traditionalists, from the first side, is that the priest who was supposed to go and burn the Talmud actually suddenly died before it could happen, and that's what saved the whole Talmud burning. So this and other things, so apparently Baal Shem Tov was having was warfare with the Sabbatians. There are other places in Shivchei Baal Shem Tov earlier where he talks about Shabtai Tzvi as being an aver meduldol, like a limb that's hanging just by the skin, so it's like a flapping, hanging limb to the body of Israel. And it was just barely holding on to Judaism. But then Shabtai Tzvi's ego, arrogance, made the final severance. And that's how Shabtai Tzvi fell off the body of Israel, so to speak. Other places, the earliest stories here, Shivchei HaBesht is that there's even at one point the Baal Shem Tov and Shabtai Tzvi have almost a showdown, fighting it out, like some place between earth and hell, like in some place in the abyss. When I read that, it reminded me, I don't know if you know one of the final stories of Sherlock Holmes. He has something where he also falls down and has some fight out with some villain. That's what it reminded me of. Be it as it may, that Baal Shem Tov was seen, even though he never physically, I mean, as far as we know, hasn't physically encountered any of the Sabbatians, but it was understood and seen that he was having the spiritual, real, fight against Sabbatianism. So it was almost like, what again?
Is it true? Elie Wiesel says that supposedly in that narrative that he couldn't redeem his soul or something. Is that how it goes down?
He said he couldn't redeem because different ways to read it, but I would say that he couldn't redeem because it was saying that he already cut off entirely, especially after he converted and all that. That's the understanding. I haven't read it in a long time, so I don't want to read too much or misquote by heart. But academics read that story with fight with Shabbatzi one way and traditionalists another way. I forget who was it, Liebes or someone, as the way that the more traditionalists don't like, whatever it is. The general point is that it was understood, even in this time, that Baal Shem Tov, and this is something very fascinating to be aware of, that that Baal Shem Tov was seen as the superhero almost, that fighting the nemesis of Shabtai Tzvi, the spiritual superhero. And that, in fact, that possibly the whole Baal Shem Tov innovative way and Chassidus and all that was to be a counter force to Sabbatianism. And it explains a lot of things. Why, for example, like there's certain teachings of the Baal Shem Tov that can sound like it's teetering on the edge of I don't want to call it full antinomianism, certainly not. But as my teacher, Professor Elliot Wolfson, coined the phrase for Hasidus, hypernomianism, not antinomianism. Like in a way, transcending the law in a way, but still anchored in the law, still observing the law. There, okay? Aver Medilda, that's it. Yeah. That's what it is, iPhone, yes. I saw it in the chat. So also explains why the Misnagdim had issues with the Baal Shem Tov, because they felt, you know what I mean? It was not out of the blue. There was something happening with Baal Shem Tov that reminded them maybe of what they were just dealing with, the Sabbatians and the Frankists.
Baruch,
yes.
Sorry, in this connection, don't we always have that in their camp itself, the author of the Mesilas Yesharim was suspected and was raided for those very reasons as well? Are you familiar with that?
Yes, or Ramchal, right?
Ramchal, correct, yes.
Yeah, but at the same time, Ramchal openly wrote and gave into Rabbi Yeshaya Besson, was his teacher, and others, and he wrote openly that he's not, and all that. But you're right, they were initially allocated, and there were others. He wasn't like Nehemiah Chiyun, who was openly Sabbatian, the first one to actually openly publish Sabbatian material, right? So not like that. Right. But yeah, so I mean, Rab Chal is accepted. Even in his time, he was more or less, I mean, he was seen as also on the margin for being too much, writing his own Tehillim Psalms, even being too much into writing his own like non-sacred literature, even speaking about visions, things that were also reminiscent of those in the Sabbatian camp in a way. But ultimately, he never preached abrogating Torah, things like that. Though, and again, so a lot, but right. So in a way, actually, when it comes to actual teachings, you could see Hasidus would have more. This is what I think, that Hasidus would have more that could be distorted by Misnagdim to say, oh, this is and like the Sabbatians. And I mean, a lot of our project that we've been going through the last with the series is and especially more recently is to show at what points the subtleties of it, meaning that the Hasidim, like on the one hand, the Hasidim were not crossing that line to Sabbatianism. But on the other hand, the way ideas were expressed allowed enough interpretation by the Misnagdic camp to accuse them. being Sabbatian or being heretical in antinomian ways, right? That's what that's this whole thing of the Machshava Zara thing, alien thoughts leads to that. That's what we were saying before, that Misnagdim, we're interpreting it that the Chassidim are saying you're supposed to have alien thoughts while you daven or learn in order to elevate. Whereas what I would say personally is a more accurate reading is that's not really about alien thoughts, that of course you should not have, but if unconsciously and helplessly they do fall into your head, then how to deal with it. Not that you should initiate by one's own initiative to start thinking things outside of prayer. And even where it says, where it could be interpreted to think things on, it doesn't really mean outside of prayer, it means in the context of the prayer itself, and so on and so forth. So here, so this too, right? And I mean, there are other elements. So, and again, we'll speak next time more in detail when we have more time to focus more primarily on this on the debate issues. Well, I just wanted to make one more point related to just the historical context of Sabbatianism and Frankism to Hasidism, because this whole series we've been learning was started off right saying that there are three main waves of the excommunications of Misnagdim against Chassidim, right? 1772, and now we're dealing with 1772 or 73. Now we're speaking 1781, 82. Now, if you look at the language of the nusach of the excommunications, so the early 1770s, Misnagdim against Chassidim, and in 1780s too, they are actually echoes of the Chayrim, the excommunications they put out. I think actually the year was 1757 or 1758 against the Frankists. So they already had the experience of putting the Frankists into excommunication and writing it up and doing the dissemination of it to the different towns and in the marketplace in a way that everyone could hear. That was then 1757 or whatever, late 1750s. So therefore, when it came 15 years later, where the Hasidic movement was what they saw as going out of control, they just continued in that way and just wrote it, updated almost the excommunications to fit the current situation of putting the Hasidim into Chayr, excommunication. Just showing you how much there is a linkage of the Frankist phenomenon with the emergence of Chassid. Okay. Anyways, let's continue. So because Reb Pinchas Karatz saw that there is this kitrug, as we say, this thing, the divine sensitivity. I don't have a better word for it now. 2 a.m, and that because of Baal Shem Tov's successful battle against the Frankists to avoid the burning of the Gemara, so now the Baal Shem Tov has to absorb that. Like someone has to take the fall for it, right? Like we say that there's a negative. So that will be the passing of the Baal Shem Tov earlier than he was supposed to. And the Pinchas Karatz felt that Baal Shem Tov's passing is imminent because of this fight with the Shatei Tzvi cult. So Pinchas Karatz, he tried to now daven with strong because he had this vision while he's davening. Incidentally, we're seeing here another. By the way, here's an example of how you could have I don't know if you want to call it a foreign thought, but he's having a vision while he's davening, and maybe he stopped davening to have the vision, whatever it is, but it's during his davening time. So he has the vision. My Rebbe is going to pass away. So now he tries to daven stronger and with more kavanah in order to combat, to break this gezerah from above. And the Baal Shem Tov should not pass away from him. But it didn't help. Karatz's power as a davening couldn't stop the gezerah from above. So he blamed himself that this is because he didn't go to the mikveh before Yom Tov. So therefore his davening wasn't fully pure enough, and therefore he wasn't able to combat this heavenly decree of the Baal Shem Tov's passing. So ba'achat tefillah, So then, okay, finishes davening. So after davening, he didn't tell Baal Shem Tov what the vision he had. So just Baal Shem Tov on its own asks him, "Im halachas mo mikvah." Hey, Pinchas, did you go to the mikveh yesterday? And Pinchas answered, "No, Rebbe, I didn't go yesterday to the mikveh." Baal Shem Tov, so the Baal Shem Tov said, "Parnasa ma'isa." That it's already done. There's nothing we can do about it. In other words, Baal Shem Tov had the premonition, understood, knew what Pinchas Karz's vision was and about his own imminent demise. And he says, you can't, now we can't do anything about it. And we can't do anything. It's like the deed was done already above. That Besht Shem Tov saying that I'm going to pass away soon. And there's no way to reverse it. Now he continues. Baal Shem Tov had the illness of shilshul. Shilshul is like gastrointestinal. So that seems like Baal Shem Tov's issue. But incidentally, Baal Shem Tov seems like suffered with things with going to the bathroom. And in fact, there's different things, even teachings and terrors of how to deal with if you need to go to the bathroom while you're davening, how to overcome the urge. And even different, it's very interesting, even has certain teachings about this, about, I don't know, scatological situations. I don't have a better way to define it. I see, yes, iPhone, yeah. I don't know, I think it's more diarrhea than constipation, it's probably, right? Okay.
In modern Hebrew, it's called shilshul, yeah.
Right. Im kol zeh,
It comes from shalshelet.
right. Like undoing, right, right.
Is it acknowledged that the Baal Shem Tov was in poor health for a lot of his life? And
I don't know if it was a lot of his life, but especially at the end. But the bathroom thing, yeah, it is different. I've seen different places, both in print and even in manuscript, that I've seen that are not published yet. Where he has a school, like some of his school is how to deal with these situations. Remember, he was a medicine man.
Right.
So he was dealing with physical things too.
Right.
And it's interesting. Some places, I don't know where. Maybe we'll see later. Things, so certain ways, things, even physical things, that sometimes Baal Shem Tov tried to first work at it through talk. And that's another thing important to know. That's one of the earliest sources that we have the whole concept of talk therapy, which we attribute to Dr. Freud. In fact, in the Shivchei HaBesht, there's more than one situation where Baal Shem Tov is like a therapist. If someone is having a schizoid experience or this vision, he goes and sits and speaks with the person, and the person's better, comes out better. Or other things, the diburim, through diburim. So you could say diburim means talk, it out with other, or certain incantations and what have you. And then sometimes it would say if the talking didn't help, then he would employ more medicinal approaches. Okay, it's very, very interesting. Okay, so after Pesach, so this seems like this was the final illness that he had, which was this related to shilshul. Even so, Baal Shem Tov still would strengthen himself. I mean, he was holding himself up enough to be able to daven at the Amud. There's also stories throughout Shivchei HaBesht, Baal Shem Tov davening for the Amud, and how his davening for the Amud opened up people's hearts and even minds in learning and so on and so forth. We don't have time now to go through them, but I would highly recommend if anyone wants more, to get your copy of Shivchei HaBesht. It's been translated in English, different versions. I think Jerome Mintz has one and others. Yeah. Okay. Now the narrative continues. Now those students, that means the elitists, the creme de la creme of his students, that were known that they're the best daveners, and that even that their davenings could have the most effect above, right? Lahidim klum, Baal Shem Tov didn't let them know about his imminent demise. He kept this secret from them. But he didn't want any intervention. His students even should daven for him that he should not pass away. Not only that, The Shalach Esim came Zacher. He even told the students, hey, leave Mezhebush, go there and there. He didn't even want them around. He was like, Baal Shem Tov was saying that he's ready to leave this world. He didn't want anyone to intervene with him. However, Rav Pinchas Karetz didn't go home, didn't go back to Karetz or wherever. It's probably because Pinchas Karetz already knew what's up. It doesn't say openly, but it's implied, and it's probably Pinchas Karetz kept this secret from the other students, from his fellow Talmidim Chassidim. Okay. So now a few weeks go by. This is how it goes by. So Beleil Shavuos Eve, right? So what Nes Anshei Skula say, we need to allow it to take an arizah. So everyone got together to learn to do the Tikkun Shavuos, like the way the arizah said to go. By the way, it's totally unrelated, but just make a note that, by the way, if you want to say the beginning, what is the beginning of the emergence of the Shabtai Tzvi movement? It was also the night of Shavuos of the year 1665. That is when Nathan of Gaza had his vision that Shabtai Tzvi is the so-called Mashiach, and that started the whole movement. And so there's something about the Shavuos Eve. Okay, so but back to the Baal Shem Tov. So they got together to do Tikkun Arizah, right? Tikkun Shavuos. But so Amar Lifneim did the Torah. So Baal Shem Tov started saying Torah to his students on what subject? About the Pesach Seder and about Matan Torah. Suppose linking Pesach to Shavuot, some great Torah. But Baker, so then the next morning, Shavuos, first day Shavuos in the morning, Shalach Anshe Skula. So he called for his close people. He asked Kulam that they should come together. The Tziva Leib Kessler, so he called Reb Leib Kessler. He's mentioned in other parts of Shivchei HaBesht. He was one of his students and helpers, I think. And so the writer of this thing, and it's another person, he forgot his name. The Baal Shem Tov called them and he let them in on the news that he's going to pass away soon. And he's telling them now, while he's alive, Baal Shem Tov is instructing them how they should bury him. And he taught them on his very body. What does it mean? As he is passing on, like these are the last hours of here on earth, he's showing them on his body. What does it mean? How to tell when limb by limb that the life force is leaving that limb of the body. He's showing them how it's like the life force leaving the toes and then the feet and then the legs, whatever it may be. Why is he doing this to them? Because Leib Kessler and this other one were part of the Chevek Kedisha. So he's showing them practically so that they can know when they're dealing with those that are mortally ill, how they could identify and recognize when the person is about to pass away and how the person is passing on. Okay? So he's showing them on his own body. What does it mean for the life force to leave? Then the Tziva, he instructed his close people. Baal Shem Tov instructed them. Then I suppose he told these two that they should go and gather a minyan to daven with him. In his Tziva she'yitin le'ah siddur, and he asked that they give him a siddur to daven. But Baal Shem Tov said, he says, I want to hang around with Hashem still a little bit more. So he davened with his siddur. I suppose it was Shacharis. Well, after davening, I suppose he was davening at home because the minyan was in his house minyan. And then one of his main disciples and comrades, Nachman Hardenka, the aforementioned Nachman Hardenka, the Torah we were learning earlier. So he went on his own from the Baal Shem Tov's house to daven because it was obvious Baal Shem Tov's not well, and he's his life force is leaving. So he went on his own to the base medrash over there in Mezhebus to daven for the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov, when he said Nachman Haradenko going to the Bishash, he's making noise. He's making a tumult up in heaven for nothing. It's not going to work. Because if he would be able to walk through the same type of door, that means the door above. Pesach there even sounds like he's pointing to his own door of his house, but he means the door is the heavenly gate. And if Reb Nachman Adenka really was at my level to know to walk through the right gate that I usually walk through to heaven, or I go through, then his prayers will work. But obviously, Reb Nachman Adenka is not. Baal Shem Tov is saying he's not on my level to know the right gate to walk through for his prayers to have the full effect. In this time, while the Baal Shem Tov is in his house, in this period, the last moments of his life, nichnas etzli nishmas meisach, the soul, the spirit of someone who passed on already, entered his house. Because this is another thing, Baal Shem Tov would make tikkun for even departed souls. And they would come show up to him, even as spirits in his house. So here, like, there's a soul hanging around me. What's the word? Like sometimes people would do, according to the sin so much that they're just souls without bodies lingering on earth. And they need a tikkun so that they could be released and go back up in heaven. So this soul of this whatever person who passed on must have sensed the Baal Shem Tov's last moments of Baal Shem Tov on earth, and he has to chaperein and go to the Baal Shem Tov to get a tikkun, so he could finally make it up to heaven. So this dead person's spirit comes into Baal Shem Tov's house. Baal Shem Tov means talking to Garba, but Baal Shem Tov chastises the soul. Va'amar, and he tells the soul, Shmayinim shanim ata navenad. For 80 years, you've been wandering on earth, like kafek elom, like you've been wandering around earth. And you waited for the last minute? You didn't hear until now that I'm here on earth? Well, why are you waiting for the very last minute? You could have come a long time ago to me to make the tikkun for you. So therefore, say Russia, get out of here, you Russia. So the Baal Shem Tov chases the soul, the spirit out of his house, right? Okay, good riddance, but no. Baal Shem Tov, what did he do right afterwards? Take it Amal Mishar, he tells his servant right away, that the spirit flew out of my house, but now it's going down the street outside. And the spirit is in such uncontrollable state that it could damage people on the street outdoors. So now run outside quickly and tell everyone on the street to go away, get off the street, because the spirit is running loose and it could hurt people. And guess what? The whoever's writing the story says, so it was. And the spirit did hurt or damage the young woman of the daughter of the Shamish of the town of Mezhebus. Though not everyone was able to escape in time. Okay, now the servant of Baal Shem Tov comes back into the home of Baal Shem Tov, and he hears Baal Shem Tov Amar. He hears Baal Shem Tov speaking. No one's there. He almost looks like to himself. He's saying aloud, I forgive you for those 2 hours. Don't hurt me. Don't torture me. He's like saying it, but there's no one around. He's just talking. So Hashem Tov's assistant asks him, me, so Rebbe, dear Baal Shem Tov, who are you talking to about to forgive the 2 hours and don't hurt me? So Baal Shem Tov says, don't you see the angel of death? That he's right here in the room with me now? Because usually the angel of death would always be afraid of me or would run away from me. Like people say, like like people say, to chase away the angel of death to the place where black pepper is grown. There's such a thing. Again, like they say, to chase away the angel of death to the black mountains. That Baal Shem Tov always, usually, normally went throughout his life, had the power, and he would just chase away the angel of death from his presence. But now, and now Baal Shem Tov says, now that they from above, they gave the angel of death permission to have power over me. Look, the angel of death grew wide shoulders. And he's all happy. I'm finally getting to chap the Baal Shem Tov now with death. So that's what Baal Shem Tov is saying. Basically saying, I have 2 more hours here on earth, so don't bother me, don't torture me these last 2 hours on earth. Okay. Now it continues. Now all the people in the city came to the Yom Tov. It must have been after davening and whatever, in the afternoon already. And all the people came to see the holy Baal Shem Tov in his house to say good Yom Tov to him. And so they all came into his house. Amalek named Divrei Torah, and the Baal Shem Tov said again more Torah to the people who came to his house. And then during the meal, must have been the Yom Tov meal the first day. Doesn't mention if there were blintzes or not. Anyways, Sival HaMasharis, he tells his assistant, to fill up a large plate with honey and present honey on the table. But the assistant filled up a small plate with honey. Amar. So the Baal Shem Tov said, Ein shilton b'yamamavis. It's a paraphrase that one does not have control on one's day of death. The literal meaning is that one doesn't have control on when one will die, on which day the person will die. But Baal Shem Tov is interpreting more that the day that you die, you lose control of the situation, of what's supposed to happen. That I feel that even my assistant, my Gabi, doesn't listen to me. I asked for honey in a big plate, big, and he giving me a small plate. Okay. And then the Baal Shem Tov said, I suppose to those assembled in the room, Ad kan gamalti imachem. Until now, that means until now, my whole life with you, I was the one bestowing chesed, kindness, mercy, generosity to you, right? That's again, Baal Shem Tov was goyma chasadim, do good, as we were speaking about earlier. But now, and now it's time for you to return and bestow chesed, generosity upon me. This is the idea that taking care of a nifter, someone who passes away, is the inyan of goyma chasadim. Right, so he's here again intimating that his end is very near. And it's time for now people take care of him. And this is what I think Beis HaKibud means. Then he went to the outhouse, I suppose, something like that. Right? We say even in modern Hebrew, kibudim, like it's a euphemism for going to the bathroom. So he went out to go to the outhouse, apparently. His assistant wanted to follow him there. I suppose he noticed Baal Shem Tov is not well, and so now Baal Shem Tov asked his assistant, what's today different than days before until now, earlier days, or other days? That you want to follow me even to the outhouse. Mara used to be. What do you see in me special today? Right? He told him basically not to follow. So the assistant didn't follow. Okay, apparently when he came back, and Gam Amar Lahem, so then the Baal Shem Tov also told those assembled to them, Hasimin, the sign, the signal, that of his passing will be, Shekasha Yifter Yamdu Hashni Zegis. When he passes away, the 2 clocks of the house will stop clicking. And this is a thing also, you see in other stories of tzaddikim and rebbes, and the whole thing is that when they pass away, the clocks of the house or the watches stop working. So apparently, Baal Shem Tov's house, there was 2 clocks, one bigger one, one smaller one. Okay. He tells them that's the signal. When the 2 clocks stop, then you'll know I for sure passed away. I saw maybe that was it. So I suppose this is when we came back from the outhouse. It says, "Rachatz yadav," he washed his hands. Vazek gadol amad, and the bigger of his two clocks stopped ticking, working. So people didn't want the Baal Shem Tov to realize that the big clock already stopped, so they stood surrounded and they like covered, standing in a way that the Baal Shem Tov couldn't, that blocked the vision of seeing the big clock that stopped. But still, Amalahem, the Baal Shem Tov told them, don't think you could cover it up. I know that the big clock already stopped ticking. And I'm not worrying about myself, about my passing. I know clearly that I'm going to go out from that door and enter right away the other door. It's again, it may have even been pointing to the doors of his house, but the idea is there. Like Lahavdil or not, the indigenous say that when one passes away, it's walking. What is it? Crossing through the doorway or the threshold, crossing the threshold or something. You're saying, in other words, he's saying, I know I'm going to have a smooth departure from this world. I'm going to right away enter whatever in heaven, Gan Eden, smooth. In other words, he's saying this whole passing away thing is just exiting one door and entering another doorway. Okay. V'yashev al mitasei, Baal Shem Tov sat on his bed. The tziva, and he instructed sheyamdu savim mitasei, and he said that the people there, someone should stand around his bed. And now he told him another divrei Torah. It seems like this may have been his last Torah. He said on the subject al amud. There's a concept in Kabbalah and other places, even mentioned, I think, in Gemara, that between the different lower Gan Eden and paradise, upper Gan Eden paradise, there's a amud, a pillar, a muda, and this idea that the neshamas they use this like almost. I don't want to use the metaphor of like not to make it too mundane in a way, but like you think of like a fireman's pole, right? There's so it's explained two ways. Both that the pillar is the transition to go from lower to above, but sometimes it also says that the neshama could also be slide down the pillar and then go up. Okay, so this amud is the way either the neshama goes up or slide down and then go up more. Okay. But the point is that there's a pillar between the lower, each level of paradise of Gan Eden. So, and also between each world, and between each world, I suppose like that's between Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya, going more up, Asiya, Yetzirah, Bria up to Atzilus, that there's this amud that sometimes it's called amuda de nahira, of the pillar of light. I forget the other terms of it. It comes to me, okay. And he explained it also, Heichu ba'ashan, how it is. Ashan doesn't just mean there's smoke, but it's an acronym of Mercedes for Olam Shana Nefesh, on the world level, on the time level, and it means space and time and soul. Like giving and explaining deeply, basically, the process of how the soul elevates not only the parts of the body, but how it ascends from world to world, up from this world up to the different levels of Gan Eden. And he explained it in the way of that process of the Aveda, that it works, how the neshama ascends up to the highest levels of Gan Eden. So he's almost talking about his like he's giving the itinerary, almost description of his own flight of his soul that he's about to take. And he told him to say the verse that we said earlier in Sfir Sa'imer, Vihinaya, that should be pleasant and all that. The Shachav, the Yashav Kamepam, and he lay down and he sat several times. The kivan the kavanas, the Baal Shem Tov had great concentration kavanas. Ad shalish, and not just like in his psychic, in his mind, but he was saying the kavanas with his lips. And he was saying it so in some form that it's maybe so loosely, so rapidly, and said in almost like a trance way, actually until they weren't able to make out and decipher exactly the letters that he was saying. We kind of, like it almost became sounding like gibberish, which wasn't. He was verbalizing, enunciating different kavanas, which until a state where it was just total beyond recognition, oral recognition, or auditory recognition. Okay. Then the tziva l'chasis b'sanin, he instructed that they cover him with a sheet. The hischol is dazeya. He started to tremble, shake. V'lachrit maybe shmenes, and shuckle like at shmenes. And this is interesting because we do have descriptions in the Baal Shem Tov how he would shake, and it seems it was in great gesticulations. Sometimes when the Baal Shem Tov was having an ecstatic experience, it says he would shake so much, almost like what's the description if I recall? Almost like chas v'shalom, like a chicken that's being slaughtered, or like his head would flap all the way from down to his heels or knees and backwards also, like it was in full body shakes up and back and forth. So this is what he must have been doing in bed also, like really shaking, shuckling away.
Possibly Parkinson's? Possibly.
I don't know. I think this was because it doesn't say anywhere that he was shaking when he didn't want to.
Only when he was.
Only when he was davening or having a certain ecstatic experience. Actually, there's the teaching also of why would he shake so much? Why shaking to daven? He once said that Hashem once said that if someone is drowning in the sea and he needs to be saved, and he's really flapping all about. No one's going to ask why is he flapping? Why is he shaking so much? Of course he's doing it. He's saving his own life. He says, I do that when I'm davening also, because when I'm davening, it's to save my life, it's my soul. Okay, so he was doing all this shuckling in bed, shaking up and down, or whatever, right to left, however. And then, then he settled down a bit. That means slowly, gradually, he stopped shaking. That means that shaking and all that was the moment that his soul was leaving his body fully. And then he started becoming more quiet, the body, and they noticed that the small clocks stopped working. So they still waited longer, see maybe the Baal Shem Tov will come back. But no, didn't happen. So they and then they did what is known the last signal. Someone passed away, you take a feather, put it at its nostrils. If there's no breath coming out of the nostrils, the person passed away. And that was the sign. They did it, and they saw that the Baal Shem Tov passed away. Okay, so there's one more piece here, and then another piece. This all I heard from Rabbi Yaakov, who was there, who was in Mezhba, from the town of Mezhbush, who apparently was there then. Rabbi Yaakov must have made Aliyah and passed away in Israel. But he heard it from Rabbi Yaakov himself, who was apparently either it was there or he heard it from people in Mezhba. Rav Amar, and this Rabbi Yaakov said, Sheblev Kessler. Okay, so maybe Rabbi Yaakov wasn't there at the actual that passing, but he certainly heard from Rabbi Kessler, who was there. He said that Rabbi Kessler told him that Rabbi Kessler that Rabbi Kessler saw the exiting, the passing, the exiting of the soul from Baal Shem Tov's body, which it looked like blue flames of fire. What does this remind you a bit of who's passing? If you look at the Idra Zutta at the end of the Zayar, which describes in detail how the Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai passes away. And there also, it's like it says there that a circle of fire surrounded the Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, and that was a sign also that he passed away. And then later also during the funeral, when the procession of the Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, there was also smoke and fire and so on following, leading the way. So another piece of two. So once, so several weeks before he passed away, Leib Kessler came to the Baal Shem Tov, and Baal Shem Tov let Leib Kessler know that he's for sure going to pass away soon. Apparently, it wasn't just Pinchas Kartzer who knew, but Leib Kessler also knew. Leib says, oh, you know what? I will give my head for your head, my eyes for your heads. Meaning, Leib says, I'm willing to give up my life, Rebbe, in order that you continue living. But Baal Shem Tov turned it down. He didn't want that. Apparently, there were some great spiritual powers that were taken from the Baal Shem Tov the last year of his life. He says, halavai, they would return me those powers that they took from me the past year. And he didn't want to live because why should he live? He doesn't have these great powers. Why Baal Shem Tov is saying, why should I continue living if I don't have these great powers that were taken from me the past year? This again intimates that possibly the whole episode for the Frankists had a spiritual effect on the Baal Shem Tov himself, that it was almost sucked away his spiritual powers almost. And now Baal Shem Tov realizing that says, therefore he doesn't want to live. He'd rather not live than to be on a diminished spiritual state. Okay. Okay. Now one last story, and this has to do with Baal Shem Tov's son. And Baal Shem Tov only had one son and one daughter. Daughter was Adul, and his son was Tzvi or Herschel. And the tradition is that actually that Tzvi took over from Baal Shem Tov after he passed away, the first year, 1760 Shavuot, until the first yard site. But during the first yard site, when all the Talmud students of Baal Shem Tov were together, Reb Tzvi at the meal said he said, I'm now having a vision here of my father is here now, and he's telling me and showing me that it's actually the Magid, the Doiber of Mizrich, is to be the successor from now on. And that is when Reb Tzvi gave up his position as the head of the Chassidic movement of the people, and that is when the Magid became the leader in development. So it's showing two things, but it's showing firstly that Herschel was in a very high level, and then also that as we'll see, but eventually he did not become the leader of the Chassidic movement. So in a way, the very beginning of Hasidism was not hereditary in the way it's now. So the two main disciples, the successors, the Baal Shem Tov, the Magid was not related to Baal Shem Tov. Neither was the Taldas Yaakov Yosef. It was also these were two of the top students of the Baal Shem Tov. Okay. I'll just say quick. So it says before it begins about the day of his passing, it says that so the Baal Shem Tov's wife predeceased him. And people were trying to encourage him to marry another woman. Baal Shem Tov answered them surprisingly, do I need a woman? I abstained. I was basically celibate. I did not sleep with my wife for 14 years. And yet this Herschel, my son Herschel, was born al pi hadibur, through the word, the holy word. There's a way of like almost spiritual, divine conception, which is done not through actual sex, but through using the holy words of God's name or incantations and so on. The Baal Shem Tov was saying, you think my son, I was even procreated through having a wife? No, he was born api hadibur, right, through the holy word. So now this is what the final piece we'll read about this, the book that will be the day that Baal Shem Tov passed away. His son Tzvi was sleeping, because his son Tzvi didn't know or didn't believe that this is the day his father is going to pass away. He was sleeping in his house, wherever. He told Baal Shem Tov, why don't you call your son to you, since you see, you know you're going to pass away. Why don't you call your son and give him over like a last will and testament? But Baal Shem Tov said, what should I do? He's sleeping. Okay, here it says openly. The Tzvi was sleeping because he didn't believe his father was going to pass away then. But still, they went out. They woke up at Tzvi, and they told him, your father, the Baal Shem Tov says, he's for sure going to pass away today. So he came to the house. Once he heard that's for sure, that his father said so, he started to cry. So like to his father, like what's happening? Of this, his father told me, I know that I gave you your special soul. Because when I unified with my wife, it means with your mother. So here he's saying actually not that he did not have sex at all, apparently. I suppose he was with his wife in bed, intimate, but still it wasn't just that procreated his son. They're saying when I was in union with my wife, all the heavens trembled. And if I wanted to, my power, I could have brought the soul of Adam Rishon. There's different versions. I think there's another one. There's another version that says Eliezer Reb Shimon, Eliezer the son of Reb Shimon Yochai, in the way of Ibur, which is pregnancy of souls. So there's two ways to read this. Either that he meant that he could have brought down the high soul of Eliezer, the Adam Rishon, or Eliezer the son of Reb Shimon Yochai, when Tzvi was conceived, or another reason. Reading this, that I could now make this idea of impregnation of the soul, which can be done even from one living being to another, or from one person who passed away into a living being. So it's like a form of reincarnation. I think we spoke about this a while ago. Difference of Ibur and Gilgal. Be it as it may, the Baal Shem Tov is saying, he's telling his son, I could have brought down into you the most lofty of souls, as great as your soul is already. And I would know, or maybe the reading is supposed to say that you would know all that needs to be known. He says, but don't worry, dear son. You don't need any higher great soul, because the soul you have already is just so holy that you don't need any other soul. Okay, so there's no reason to even carry on into you now any new holy soul. See, I said, nonetheless, please, Tati, Daddy, please tell me something for now that you're about to pass away. The Hitzli Lemelei. I think, I'm not sure how this reading is. I do have a print copy of it. Maybe this is a misprint. I'm not going to dig for it now. It could be Hitzli was like he reigned, or maybe that he was really begging his father to tell him something, like some last words before he passes on. Or rather, no, I'm sorry, it's my memory. I think it's the Hitzli Malay. That maybe the Baal Shem Tov himself started like ringing to tell him. He's like started saying, maybe like stuttering or saying things that were incomprehensible to his son. Tzvi started telling him some Amar, any maybe Mat Shat Emer. So Tzvi said, "Was Tati, I don't understand what you're saying." But Amar, so Baal Shem Tov said, "Takif li Alma. The world has grabbed too strong on me. That means I came to the end. The Ini Yachal Medavrim Chai. That means this. I can't even communicate with you anymore. That means the reality has hit me here. That I'm about this, and I'm at this state. I can't even speak to you well now." But he did have, and the Baal Shem Tov did have enough in him to communicate to his son the following. He did give over to his son Tzvi one holy name of Hashem, like one mystical name, like teaching. And Baal Shem Tov told his son Tzvi to have kavanah with this name, and when you do, the Tira, I say, this will give the power that I will come in vision to you, even after I pass away. And then, even after I pass away, I'll continue learning. I'll be able to learn you. So his son Amalei asked him, maybe I'll forget this special name you're telling me now. Amalei school, she's good to shame. So Baal Shem Tov also told his son a certain school, a way that he could read a method that he could remember, not forget the name. So now the narrator of this story says, I forget what was the school that the Baal Shem Tov told the Tzvi of how not to forget the name. Meaning the writer must have known, if not the name itself, but the school, and not to forget the name. But even the school itself, the writer forgot. It reminds us this famous story of right, that the story who was the Baal Shem Tov went to a special place, a wagon, and at this, and he daven and all that, and Eli Wiesel brings it down, and how each generation forgets another part of it. They forgot the place, they forgot how he got there, they forgot the actual prayer. And what you're left to is, but we forgot it all. The final generation says, but at least we still have the story, right? So same thing here. We forgot this, we don't know the name, forgot the name, we forgot even school to the name, but at least we have the story that it was given over. So this is basically the way it's described in Shivchei HaBesht, which is again the earliest version, I want to call it most authentic version of stories of the Baal Shem Tov.